I'm Jeremy Till, and this is Amplify. Dan Martell's joining us from Canada, guys. Our second guest from the great nation of Canada. It was a pleasure to have him. He was a suggested guest from another podcast guest. That's Jake Thompson. And so just connecting the world here with entrepreneurs, thought leaders out there in the marketplace. And Dan is one of those. And so he's had multiple big sales successes in the tech space and now takes that knowledge and wisdom and information to the marketplace to help entrepreneurs succeed. So he's got great energy, a lot of information and positive nuggets to build on your own personal success. So let's get into Dan. I know I watched your video on CrossFit and it was good. I've been doing CrossFit now for 11 years. So I got
Dude, you're OG. You're like the old school. 11 years. So that was
dinosaur.
2005?
Yes, sir.
And like the main site started in 01 or 2?
I believe the first CrossFit workout was posted in 01. And so that was the beginning of the online posting. And then the first affiliate came online in 2004 in Northern California, West Coast. I think it was Northern California. That was the beginning of the affiliate model. But, I think it was interesting kind of breaking down your view of CrossFit and kind of been with it from the beginning to see it where it is now. And whenever you're talking about the business model and kind of like breaking down like the way that it's done and set up and all that, it's really unique because everything you were saying, all I really was saying, you were saying this and that and this in the sense of maybe the way the business was constructed. Is really built out of community, and I think people's love and passion for functional fitness, and I think that's really what stimulated the whole model and what it's become today, because the organic nature of the business, Glassman really allowed the community to build the business. So, it was very natural and organic in the sense of, where it went and how it grew and blew up and all that stuff. But
that was the part that I found fascinating. My light almost just fell. Was the I guess the lack of thought or the lack of strategic thinking that was the byproduct of the business model. You know what I mean? Like it was. I'm such a business guy that I'm like, I'm always trying to think 3 steps ahead, and I feel like it was so organic and so community driven. Yet it just landed on all these incredible principles that that's the fascinating part, right?
Mm-hmm. And so it's the neat thing about it too is that you also get a intersection of the current time in the United States due to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the desire for people wanting to move back into more of a natural environment, and then the recession. So if you look at the Great Recession, the wars, and people cutting back on their budgets and looking to do a lot more self-development, and where they're putting their funds for growth and self-growth. And then you saw also the explosion of the mud runs as well. And so now, though, a decade later, we're seeing transitions in, the health and wellness in the sense of where it's going and what people are looking for in larger droves. So I think there's a lot of factors that play into it. But in my own research of CrossFit and the dynamic of it is really, you hear a lot of top performers speaking about flow state and CrossFit. And there's a book that talks about like the 8 points. It's 8 or 10 key factors into enjoyment and just joy as a whole. And some of those factors are is a start, an end point, a community experience, and then also points where you have to become fully engaged and present. And so in CrossFit, it draws in all of your, your sight, the tactile and physical realms that you have to be completely present. So it creates this dynamic where, you're just in a state of like peace, because today's age, you just don't get a lot of total engagement experiences. And so it's just kind of a lot of stress relief as you, stress in the body and whatnot. So, anyways, yeah, it's pretty neat in the sense that you've been doing it. Are you still participating in CrossFit or after?
Yeah, dude, I went this morning. I'm pretty much trying to just keep putting headlocks in all my family members and trying to get them in the box. Like, I actually am also, it's not, are we recording yet, or we're just talking?
We're 100 miles an hour right now, bro. We're on.
All right, we're going. Well, there's some super duper secret stuff that I can't talk about yet, but I'm going to be involved in CrossFit in a pretty big way. So my whole thing is like, how do I integrate my life into all the things I'm passionate about? And about, a year and a couple months ago, I got my wife and I would bring the kids. I mean, it's pretty. We went to the game. Oh, I went to the games last year. My wife was upset she didn't make it, but we're going to go this year as a family. So.
Yeah. So when you say you're going to be involved with CrossFit, you mean like you're going to be working with CrossFit Inc. and working with headquarters?
No, more involved on a local level.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, that's really where it happens, for sure. So that's cool. So I know you were talking about your family a little bit, and I think you were saying you had children. So get into that, like where you are. I know you reading your bio, you developed a couple companies and sold them, and kind of give me a blueprint to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, so real quick, my background, I actually grew up, many entrepreneurs, it's funny when I talk to them and ask them about their upbringing, some of them have had some pretty challenging, moments. I actually went through quite a bit, 11 years old, got taken out of my house and put into foster care, eventually ended up, getting introduced to drugs, and life just spiraled out of control to a point where I was in a high-speed chase, and cops, I crashed in the side of a house, cops pulled their gun. I went to grab a gun that was in the car, and it got stuck. And, for the grace of whoever was looking out for me, I woke up sober the next day in a jail cell and just kind of pleaded if anybody was looking out and to help me get through that moment. I was 17 at the time, that I would kind of dedicate my life to just giving back and not wasting it. And, I spent 11 months in rehab after I went to jail. So I actually went to jail for 6 months, got out, went to rehab, and it was there that I discovered computers. So I'd never touched a computer prior to that. I picked up this book on programming, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, it kind of reads like English. It was on Java. It's like, and then, I started typing it into the computer, and it started kind of doing the commands. And I was like, man, if this is how you build applications, I think I could do this. Then I got out and discovered the internet, which turned out to be kind of a big deal. And since then I've built 5 companies myself. So software companies, raised money for the last 2. I had Mark Cuban invest in one of my companies, not through Shark Tank, just through an email thread. I've invested in 34 companies as an angel investor. So really privileged to kind of be asked and really allowed, because some of these companies are, like Hootsuite, which is now $1 billion company. In the early days, it's like, they're like, why should I take your money versus somebody else? And I'm like, I can help you in the marketing. So that's kind of what I've been known for. So building companies, growing, have 2 kids, Max and Noah, 3 and 4 years old, 11 months apart. So Irish twins. And I am passionate about living life. So family is always first, and then, as much time as I have left over to kind of help grow and scale companies. So what I do today, and the reason for the video on my YouTube channel is, about a year and a half ago, I started producing these weekly video to help entrepreneurs grow, specifically software entrepreneurs, because that's kind of what I've done my whole life. The other area is just typically entrepreneurs are doing 2 million plus in revenue or trying to get to 10. It's kind of a no man's land of growth that they run into trouble. And then just like personal development, just how do you be a better version of yourself? And that's why I've resonated such a big way to CrossFit. So that's what I do, and that's who I am.
Nice. And then how old are you?
37. Just turned 37.
37. Nice. And so you said you're in Canada now. What is that? Tell me about where you grew up, and then how you've made it to Canada and where you are. You said a little bit over across the United States.
So I mean, I grew up in New Brunswick, Canada. It's above Maine. So if you know where Maine is, I call it the top hat of Maine, right on the ocean. So about 7 miles away from the ocean that way. And because I just grew up here. I think anybody that's ever had ambitions for more in life, they're always like, I bet there's better stuff outside. So at 21, packed up my bags, drove out west. It was 1987 Volkswagen Jetta, mountain bike on the roof, and that was it. And it was 9/11. So it was like I left September 8th, 2001, and then 9/11 happened when I was driving in the prairies, and then ended up on the other end with no opportunity, no hopes. And that was really what forced me into becoming an entrepreneur, because I had to start consulting, and most of the places that were going to hire needed you to be a contractor. So that was, both, obviously a very sad time, but also forced me to kind of get my stuff together at a pretty young age. So ended up leading teams in the technology space at 21 with people that were, almost twice my age. And through that process, discovered how to lead, and that's when I decided when I was 24 to start my company, Spheric Technologies, and that was the business. I had two companies before that were complete failures, but that was the one that I started reading books. I got a mentor. I just did what people suggested, and it worked out to 4 years later. We were doing about 3.2 million in revenue, 30 employees, and we got acquired, which wasn't a planned or expected. And I still kind of laugh at the circumstances because it was just like, it was, sometimes it was luck, and it was May 2008, right before the crash. So some people think I'm brilliant and I just got lucky. So that was the beginning of kind of everything that came after that.
Yeah. So you've mentioned self-development a few times, and like, where have you seen, because, there's a lot of different self-development that's out there, but for you personally, where did you see sticking points for you and you needed to grow to get to that next point? And how did self-development help you to get from point A to point B where you might have hit a rough patch?
I think everything. One, the imposter syndrome. Anybody, probably box owners to, entrepreneurs, like, who am I? Who am I to start this? What gives me the right to actually, plan or dream big? I think that was the big one. So reading great books around those topics really helped me just kind of build the confidence. And I think people misunderstand confidence. They think confidence is about self-esteem, about like their belief in themselves. And it's not. I think confidence is the belief in your ability to get over things. So I think people kind of confuse those and they say, oh, I need to be more confident. What they really need is just the ability to believe that they can figure it out. Because everything I've ever done since then, I didn't know how to do it. I just believed I could figure it out. But I would say, there's kind of three main areas I think in life that are important to kind of nail. The morning routine. I think that, any book that you read around success habits or personal growth, they all talk about kind of kicking off the morning. And so if you don't have a morning routine, I always suggest people try to figure out and create one. It could be as simple as 5 steps. What's unique about my suggestion is I call it habit chaining. So essentially you kind of script out what you want to do every morning, and really it could be less than 60 minutes. And you wake up and I have it in my calendar. So it like goes off, I open it and I just go through it. And it's everything from journaling to meditation to exercise to reading. And it's chained in the sense that I don't do 3 without doing 1. And I think there's a process of, especially when you wake up in the morning, kind of what state your brain's at, that you might be better off kind of journaling before any voices start talking about what you can and can't do, and reviewing your goals for the year, and then maybe reading to kind of inspire you. But that to me is a big one. 2, I would say, the reading and personal development. Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi was an incredible book. That taught me the power of the peer group, and I think that's another reason why CrossFit is such an incredible sport, is just that community aspect. So, Keith talks about leveraging the time that people eat to invite people to break bread and build connections and rapport. So that to me is huge. I think you're a byproduct of those people you spend the most time with. And then the third area, if I had to pick one, is probably just around productivity. And I think that especially for entrepreneurs or gym owners or whoever, they end up spending time doing $10 tasks instead of their high value stuff. Everybody's got a core genius. Everybody's got a skill or an approach that when they're working in that area, they just feel like time flies. They got to figure out how to move from, sweeping the floors to, whatever it is, to spending more time maybe building out coaches or building out your team or doing a marketing strategy, because that's where leverage comes from. And that to me is business. If you get a good morning routine, you got a great peer group, and you figure out how to get leverage in your time, the business usually takes care of itself if you're producing a great product.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because being in this space of CrossFit for over 11 years and working and communicating with affiliates and box owners, it's really interesting. What you're talking about is a specific game of business, and what you find in this space, and I think it probably transcends other spaces, is that not everybody's playing the same game. And so when you start talking about leverage and you start talking about bringing other people in to do these $10 tasks, that's like, well, I love to do this I like to clean the gym floor. And you're like, okay. And it's like, okay. And then it's like, well, I'm making enough money to pay my bills, and life is working right now. So, that's one side of the coin, of the people that do, run boxes that you find. And then
so I just want to give this, because my dad was like that. He was a very successful real estate developer that still mowed his own lawns. And I always joked with him, and this is when I got him. I said, if you love to mow the lawn so much, Dad, why don't you do it for the neighbor for half the price? You know what I mean? Like or double the price, whatever it is. Like, if you love to mow the lawn, why aren't you doing it for your neighbor? Because that's essentially what you're taking from you, right? That time. And he's like, oh yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like, just a thought.
Yeah. It's really interesting now with having a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and then really discerning, how you leverage time. And it's been I've always been of that mindset of leveraging time, bringing, so I can pursue what it is that I want to do. And if it's hobbies or business related or family related. But I think that's that, as I've moved, and I think in this whole space of mindfulness and meditation, some of these things can become meditating. My producer, I think he made a Facebook post making fun of mindfulness this past month. But what his whole point was, mindfulness can come into weightlifting. It can come into...
It's meditation. Like, and I forgot to mention that in the video, but you are doing nothing when you're doing, a WOD other than counting. Like, you're not thinking, I'm not thinking about my laundry. I'm not worried about the day. I'm present. And I don't think people understand that. I would say CrossFit is both a movement practice and a meditative, kind of awareness practice. So I just had to throw that in there because it occurred to me about a month ago.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Especially once you get past the complexity of the movements, you can really start to get into getting freed up of all that mind restraint. So absolutely. So, moving on from where you started and getting your businesses and things like that, now currently, tell me about what you're up to and what you do for a living.
Yeah, so I pretty much, I still invest in companies. I got kind of 3 areas of my life. I've got the coaching and training side. So I work with really incredible entrepreneurs, helping them scale their businesses. So I do that predominantly through my YouTube channel. So I give away 98% of my strategies for free through my channel. And then for a small handful of people that are on my newsletter, a couple times a year, I might open up enrollment in one of my group programs. So I do that. That's probably 20-30% of my time. And then the other area is essentially what's called micro private equity. So I invest my own money in buying majority ownership stakes in other companies. And in doing so, create a portfolio. It's pretty straightforward if you've ever heard of equity or private equity, but it's kind of micro in the sense that it's usually companies doing 2 to 5 million in sales. So that's the similar. What's cool about it is it's the same activity as coaching the entrepreneurs. It's that one, they kind of pay me to get involved in their business. The other one, I do it for my own portfolio. And then the third area is I work with at-risk youth, helping them build their confidence through starting their own company. So I do that. It's a program called the Entrepreneurship 420. I do that in as big a way possible. Last year, I spoke to over 1,200 kids. This year, we're kind of expanding the model so that I can actually serve people in other cities. So we're doing monthly calls. I do a lot of speaking around that. And it's just like, because of where I came from, I just feel that, I'm in a pretty interesting opportunity spot to give back. And I try to do that. So that's like an active, part of my week almost. But those are the 3 big areas that I like to, that I think about.
Got it. And so going back to the self-development, who are some mentors or someone maybe from a distance that you look to that you learn from?
Well, the first book I ever read was a book called Love is a Killer App by a guy named Tim Sanders. So highly recommend it. It was the gateway drug to reading in general, just because his arguments were, one, you should acquire knowledge for your customer. So not even for yourself. He was like next level. It's like, imagine if you read books to serve your customers. Like if you knew they were in this industry and you're like, I'm going to read about that and maybe give them some tips. So that was pretty mind blowing. Your network is your net worth. So the really big on connections connections. I think we got connected through Jake at Compete Every Day, right? And that was just like at an event. We met, we connected. I've probably spent hundreds of dollars with him now at this point, and pretty much all of my cities walking around with his gear on, which makes me smile. So the network side, other people, I mean, there's traditional marketing brains like Seth Godin, definitely pretty much read every book he's ever written. I'm just really inspired by the builders, right? And also documentaries. So I would say Seeking Wisdom is an incredible book on just psychology. Most people have never heard of it. And really helps people understand how the world works and how psychology works and mental models. From Darwin to Munger is the subtitle, and it's really like extracting what the author learned from Charlie Munger and Darwin and kind of creating this incredible book. Again, it's an expensive book. I think it's like $60 on Amazon. Most people never heard of it. It's easily one of my favorite books in the world. To guys like Malcolm Gladwell, wrote Blink and Tipping Point, but he's got, this is a tip, I want to give everybody this one, podcast called Revisionist History that most people have never heard of, that is just as good as his books, on iTunes for free, and just deconstructs or essentially revisits historical moments and paints the picture of this is what people thought, but here's what really happened behind the scenes. So I really like that. And then I watch pretty much all Netflix documentaries. I think Netflix is probably the best value, $7 a month. I think I bought it early days, so I'm grandfathered in. And one of the top documentaries that I would throw out there is Burt's Buzz, which is on Burt's Bees, the company and really just the story. I just think there's so many people that they see things after the fact, right? You see, like they come to your, Jeremy, they see what you're doing and they're in awe, right? But it's like 11 years later. And I just love the fact of going back to the beginning and seeing how the origin story played out. So there's a ton of documentaries on Netflix that are free. And then also there's this incredible TV series that Netflix produced called Chef's Table. So you foodies out there, or really just anybody interested in business, it deconstructs the chef's mindset of all these epic restaurants around the world and really show their process. So I'm a big process guy. And I think that it's, again, all of these in my mind are underrated that I would love to bring to the consciousness of people watching this to go check it out.
Got it. So would you consider yourself a teacher or an educator?
Yeah, I fought with that word for a long time because I've always identified as a builder, right? I'm an operator. Like I build my own companies. And when I started doing the YouTube channel, I just did it originally for my kids. So my early videos, probably the first 20, were all about like beliefs and approach to life. Cause I figured, I should document some of these ideas so that, God forbid something happened to me. I had a really good friend of mine, pass, and that really kind of triggered. He had 2 girls, same age as my boys. And I was like, man, I should probably just shoot some videos. So I started doing that, and that started building my email list. And then it was through that process that people started reaching out, asking me to help them. And I didn't have anything formal. And I put together this group, and then all of a sudden it sold out. I had 20 spots. It sold out in like less than an hour, just sending an email. And I priced it premium. Like I was like, if you're serious, here's what I've got, and we'll work together for 6 months. And I think through that process, I've become very much aligned with the concept of teacher, trainer. I don't like the word coach because, I'm more prescriptive. Like I don't do well. Like I've had business coaches in my career, and they're more like, they use a Socratic method, right? They just ask you questions like, so what are your top challenges? What do you think are some of those solutions? Which one do you feel like doing? And I'm like, is this really coaching? Like, you're just going to ask me questions for me? I could do this in front of a mirror. What I'm more of like, tell me your challenges. Here's the way to think about it. Here's a personal story that I kind of encountered. And here's the framework that I use to think through it. And that's what I do in my YouTube videos. That's what I do when I get together live with my entrepreneurs. So I think that the word teacher or trainer probably resonates more now. But for a long time, probably up till 3 months ago, I would have never said that.
Got it. And so do a lot of people that join your group, are they in the technology realm?
Yeah, so I have a program called Idea to Exit, which is all software. So I do have like a core group of my audience that are following me that want to scale their software companies. But then usually as a byproduct of that, then they want to become epic entrepreneurs. Like, how do I actually learn how to lead and scale teams independent of just learning how to build the software part, right? And those people in that group, that's a separate group, that's about a third. So a third software, and then I've got people in manufacturing, agencies, services. I actually got Chris Cooper, who's one of the CrossFit trainers, and I think some of his videos are now on HQ. So I mean, that I just love helping people really scale their businesses. So like, I attract anybody. I mean, if anybody watches my YouTube videos, you'll see that I'm software focused, but I teach it in a way that applies to all businesses.
Got it. And so you've said leadership or lead a few times. What does it really mean to you to do leadership or to, be in that space?
I mean, number one, I think you got to set the vision, right? Like most people I remember the other day I was talking to one of my clients and they were upset because their team didn't do what they expected them to do. And I was like, have you ever told them what you expect? Like, have you ever communicated your values? Have you ever explained to them how what they're doing aligns with the big picture? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, you can't be upset. So one is you set the vision and you communicate the vision. Then I would say you embody the vision. So the worst thing you could ever do as a leader is, do what I say, not what I do. I mean, that won't fly. And especially into this world, there's so many millennials that they'll bounce jobs every 6 months because they don't feel aligned. Like they're so, mission driven and spiritual that you literally, like, it's almost to be competitive today, you need to make that part of your operating model for your business. So being the example of the values that you communicate, and then also I would say integrate them into your business. I think a lot of leaders may say they have values and try to communicate them, but they never integrate them into their weekly meetings or their coaching one-on-one with one of their teammates or even a customer. Like so I think values are meant to hire and fire against. So they're filters to ensure nobody bad gets into the business, and they're used to reinforce the right behavior. And if they're not, you get them out. But you can also use them for the customer. So if you have a value around how people should treat each other and you have a customer being abusive, that's a clear delineation of they're not a fit for my business, and you can ask them to go on, which is next level leadership, because most businesses would be scared to essentially fire a customer. But I think that when you talk leadership, what better act to show that you protecting your team from especially abusive conversations or expectations than actually going that far and saying, you know what, you got to go find another company to serve you because we're just not a fit. So that's leadership in a nutshell.
Yeah. So what do you think, if you could construct a few processes that you think take a company from 3 million to 10 million, what are some key aspects of that gap that is challenging for people to bridge?
Well, the number one is the financial commitment. So what happens when you go from like 2 million to 3 is you start investing ahead of your growth, which usually means your expenses get out of whack and your profit margins go down. So this is, and if anybody's watching, they feel this. There's some other videos on YouTube, I've talked about it. They push for growth, and then they get to the point where they're at 3 or 4 million, and then the end of the year they look and they either broke even or not or lost money, and then go, why would I do this? So they're stressed out. They're working twice as hard as they were at 2 million, and they made no money. And they hit that wall, and then they bounce back. They go, screw this. I'm going to lay off a third of my staff. I'm going to get rid of my customers that I don't feel are great. And we're just going to go back to the 2 million because that felt great, felt more manageable, et cetera. That's what happens when you don't have a plan. What you want instead, and I teach this framework around kind of the financial guidelines, it's called the golden grid. We're understanding how much you should be spending on a different kind of revenue bands. What should you be spending on overhead, salary for your team, what's called the salary cap, owner's pay, so what you should be paying yourself as an owner, how much profit you should be making, and the gross margins on your services. That way, if you have those kind of financial filters, the rails, then you can navigate, revenue band to revenue band to make sure you don't get out of whack and you don't end up the year end going, I lost money and I worked twice as hard as I should. That's a big thing. And then another key area is just the people. So it's a longer conversation, but in a short window, it's most entrepreneurs don't hire people to what I call lead, manage, and are accountable for a function in their business. They hire people to do a job, right? So the other day I was talking to a client. They're like, I need a marketing person to run my Facebook ads. And I said, okay, you could hire a marketing person to your Facebook ads, and that totally makes sense, and I get it. But what you probably need is somebody to lead, manage, and be accountable for marketing. And they're like, yeah. And I said, okay, well, you have a budget to hire somebody to do Facebook ads. If you took more time and gave a little bit more kind of salary focus, you could probably hire somebody that'll be accountable for your marketing function. So that way you don't have to be involved, and that way the business can grow. So the gap between 3 and 10 million is really teaching the entrepreneur how to build a simple accountability chart within their business of those different areas. And how do they hire people to actually lead those functions in the business so that they get freedom, because if all they're doing is hiring for a position, they're still on the hook to manage those people, which causes them more overhead, more time, and they're actually not getting free from the business as they grow. And that hurts. And then usually when things hurt, they scale down.
That's awesome.
That's the quick version, man. Jeremy, you asked me, so I wanted to give you the answer, but that is a simplified answer.
Yeah. So when you look at entrepreneurs and that bridge between that pain and pleasure and going to a $10 million company, do you think that like that pain that they're experiencing on the top side of 10 million, is that reward, is that dependent on the person's goal, or is it equatable to the value of running a $2 million company versus a 10?
You know, I think a lot of it, at the end of the day, no matter what somebody wants out of life, right? PRs at the gym to revenue in their business to a great relationship, the person that's accountable for getting that for them is themselves, right? So like I'm always conscious and reminding my entrepreneurs that no matter what frustrations, what happens to you in your business, et cetera, like the person that's stopping you from going to that next level is the guy looking at you in the mirror, or the gal. And that level of accountability sometimes is not present, right? They'll say, well, I don't have the money to grow, or I don't have the people, or X, Y, and Z. It's like, at the end of the day, what I love about business is the ultimate personal development program. Like, it's literally you against the world, and you own 100,000% your results. And I think that instead of being frustrated with not having, you should be grateful. And that, it sounds crazy, man. Like, this is weird. It's schizophrenic, because like, you want to be accountable, and then you're like, I should be grateful for the problems. It's like, yeah, I remember one time, and I'm going to throw in Oprah's name in here, which always is a fan favorite. But Oprah said she was getting sued for $1 billion, and everybody's like, oh my God, what does that feel like? It was the mad cow people, because she totally blasted them on her show. And she said, I'm grateful to be in a position to be sued for $1 billion, right? Like, the fact that you get sued for $1 billion means you got $1 billion. So Oprah had $1 billion, and she kind of flipped the whole perspective. So I think that those two things of the 100% or 110% accountability, and saying it's not about the money or the team or the market, and it's really about me being resourceful. And on the flip side, having that attitude of gratitude, even when major things happen, like a customer fires you, or a lease contract negotiation didn't go the way you want, and being happy for that and saying, you know what, this is going to make me a stronger entrepreneur. Hard to get into that mindset, but that to me is it's the foundational to what we just talked about a second ago on those kind of 3 key areas, because if you don't believe in that stuff, it's going to be hard for you to execute at the higher level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk. He was doing an interview, and they're just talking about billionaires holding counter thoughts to what they're actually pursuing, and being able to juggle those diametrically opposed thoughts to what they're pursuing allows them the versatility to move through challenges that they face, because they have this prong approach to how they're pursuing their end goal.
It's intelligence is that being able to maintain in your head 2 opposing thoughts at the same time, right? And doing that not out of fear, but out of well, what could go wrong? Let me think about it. All right, I've got myself covered, and then move forward with this sense of confidence. Most entrepreneurs have a hard time doing that.
Well, that really, being 11 years in the walk of entrepreneurship and building, and I think Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about DNA and what people, because yeah, you can go out and hustle, you can work, but at some point, when does your abilities to elevate, become the ceiling? And so I look at it because at the same time, I'm very supportive and encouraging of people going out there and making it, pursuing their dreams and making it happen. But at some point, when does that person's, limitations become their ceiling, and they might not be able to move into a new frame? And as you reflect, I always turn any question I ask about others onto myself and ask, where is my fit in my domain, and where can I transcend into a new marketplace, new business venture, and move into? Because for the longest time, what you're talking about with venture capitalism and investing, that was beyond my realm of even desire to think about, because I was really locked into a sole owner operator. Like, I wanted to be the man. I wanted to operate. I wanted to have 100% equity. And then it was like, whoa, what a limitation. But it was very geared out of ego and was a self-limiting, factor as I've started to, grow up and mature and then have a different perspective. But I think that question about, what DNA and what people's skill sets really can, I don't know how you've dealt with that, and just like, hey, this is, because Gary was talking about, hey, maybe it's not bad to be sixth on the Facebook team. You're worth a couple, billion. It's not a problem to be sixth. So not being the sole owner and the operator or the key man, but maybe you should be third on the ranks and perform, extraordinarily on that level, and, see your skills apply to the team and all that stuff. So just an interesting conversation, I think, being in a space and really analyzing my own skill sets and where I can take myself into the future, and the people I'm going to, either partner with or work with into the future as well.
Well, just on that one there, I did a video last week that got a lot of traction, which is really about the 3 business personality types. And it speaks to that specific thing because, there's the entrepreneur, which everybody wants to be and assumes they are when they start a business. And then there's the artist, which is the person who's like the craftsman who builds the product, or they care about the customer experience, or, the creative. And then there's the manager, right? And the manager is the person to make sure that things get done, more operationally focused and schedule. And like, all 3 are required, right? The E-Myth Michael Gerber talks about in his book. But you can be, you've got Stephen Curry, who's the artist in basketball, making, whatever, 30, 40 million a year. You've got the coach of the Golden State Warriors making 5, 6 million, or the manager, 6 million a year, not nothing, he's not getting what the players are getting. And then you've got the owner, who's making, he's built almost $1 billion franchise, which is the entrepreneur. So like, people, and the deal is all 3 are required. So I think that's the big idea. What Gary's saying is that you can play a role in somebody else's team and be early, but it is about that team. And so even if you're the leader, you should be at least cognitive enough to say, well, where do I index towards? Am I the artist? Well, if I'm the artist, maybe I should find the entrepreneur to complement me, because I'm not going to be pushing if the vision is to build a big business. Some people not, and that's totally cool. But if it is, then you got to say, because Tim Cook of Apple was Steve Jobs' manager. Steve Jobs said it. Steve was the entrepreneur. Tim Cook was the manager. Right? Johnny Ives was the artist. All 3 were required to build an Apple. So just some food for thought.
Well, who's going to be the entrepreneur of Apple then, huh?
Somebody needs to step up, doesn't he? Because nothing they've launched has been impressive at all.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, kind of moving on into some key questions. I know we talked about some books, things like that. Just one thing we always like to ask is favorite movie, favorite book, favorite podcast.
I'd almost want to punt to those previous books that I've mentioned, because those are definitely my favorite. If I had to throw in another podcast, I would say James Altucher's podcast is really interesting, just because he's a good friend of mine. He's the wackiest dude in the world. Like, he'll literally cut off. Like, I remember the most awkward interview he ever did was with a rapper. I forget who it was, but the guy was just ready to punch him in the face, because like, he was not even listening to him and he was cutting him off. That was an interesting one. Tim Ferriss, right? Most people know Tim Ferriss, 4 Hour Work Week. His interview with, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting it. He's an actor. He can also sing. African-American, anyways, that was an epic interview. Somebody's going to leave a comment. I'm going to leave that open loop. And then I say favorite movie. Man, I'm very eclectic in my movie styles, but I would have to say I'm a big action fan. So anything in the X-Men genre, Iron Man. Yeah, I'm going to say other than like the documentaries on Netflix, action movies are my pick.
Awesome. All right, then, if you were to give 3 applicable advice to anybody from your life, like 3 nuggets that you would want to share with the individual, what would 3 be?
Well, some of them I answered in my first videos, right? Because I was always doing those in the first 6 months under the filter of what would I want my kids to know, right? So one would be don't wish no problems, wish that you could become the person who can deal. I think that's back to some of the stuff we've talked about. Just I think people they have challenges in their life and they're like, oh, I wish I didn't have this. And what I always wish in those moments is that I'm the person that can overcome them or that knows how to deal with it. So that's one. I think another one is honor your gut. I think a lot of people actually already know in their soul what they should be doing. So I have this whole motto of JFDI. I'll let you guys Google it to figure out what that stands for. But JFDI really stands for honor your gut. If it speaks to your soul, say yes, take action, do it. So that's a big one. And then another one is you are your community. So to the CrossFit people watching and anybody else who's not part of a community, like get around great people that are striving for excellence every day, because it will rub off on you. And really you will rise yourself or lower yourself to the standards and expectations of people around you. If you want to get fit, I mean, literally, like Jeremy, you know this. If anybody's like overweight and wants to get fit, go spend all your time with a bunch of Ironman athletes or CrossFitters. Like you'll feel awkward ordering the nachos and the crappy burger at lunch if you're with those people. So it's like kind of the you are your community is the byproduct of those people. So I would say those are the big lessons that I try to reinforce with my own kids. So probably the most relevant.
Got it. And then what is some of the best advice that you've received?
There's tons of advice. Best advice I received. In the early days of starting my business, 2 years into building my company Spirit, I almost went bankrupt, which would have been my 3rd failure in a row. And luckily I found a mentor, a guy named Jerry Pond. And truthfully, the big mental shift for me talking to Jerry, and he was like 75 years old. He'd built all these crazy companies. He said and it sounds like so simple, but he said it's normal. And I was like, what do you mean it's normal? Like I was going through major challenges in my business, and just him saying it's normal, like me not feeling like a complete idiot, and him saying we've all been there. And he started telling me stories of his businesses at that stage and why they're so fragile and how he overcame them, and some of them he didn't. And just to feel part of like that I was part of a community or a group of people that were striving to do something interesting, and failure was just part of it, or getting into trouble was part of it. So I just thought that advice was big. The other one I'm going to lead people on, back to the morning ritual stuff. This guy, one of my dad's friends, Wayne, growing up, he was our neighbor, only entrepreneur I knew in my whole life growing up till I was like 20. And I took him out for breakfast one day, sit him down. He's since passed, which kind of makes it a bit sad, but Wayne sat me down. I asked him, what's the number one, same question, what's the best advice you'd give to an entrepreneur starting off? And he thought about it. And I kind of felt like nobody had ever asked him that before. And this guy had built like motels and a lot of real estate stuff. And he just thinks about it, and then he looks at me and he says, habits. And I was expecting like this, like what we've been doing, strategy, frameworks, methodologies, and he's just like habits. And I was like, man, this guy doesn't know shit. Like I was just like, this is, like, I mean, I could have read that on the first word of a book. And truthfully, it took me 3 years to figure it out. It's just that daily ritual of best practices, of the slight edge, the compound effect. I mean, you name the book, those are all books you guys can all search for that talk about just that idea of little bit of effort every day compounds over time. Warren Buffett said that compound interest is one of the most powerful forces out there. And Wayne had it right. And it took me 3 years to realize that. So I'd want that to land for everybody watching this.
Got it. So what do you see like the next 5 years for you looking like?
The next 5 years, I really want to impact and train a lot of people. So in the education business, that's what I call it. I have a vision to have 10,000 clients at scale. We're going to get into in 3 years, we're going to get into 3 countries. So we're going to add the UK, and then probably in year 5, we'll add Australia, because that's another market that I've got a lot of people in my community from. On the private equity stuff, I mean, I'm putting together a portfolio of companies that over time will do $1 billion in revenue combined. So that's kind of that's kind of my mission in life, is just to build that group of like-minded entrepreneurs that want me as a partner to come in and help them scale their companies, and together as a group that'll really help them and really kind of create that internal knowledge sharing amongst them. And then the third area around the at-risk youth, I mean, my plan in 10 years is to teach 100,000 at-risk youth businesses. Not even teach. I want to help 100,000 at-risk youth start companies, right? I don't care if they start for 6 months and then fail. I want them to learn how to create value, transact that value, communicate it, extract it from the customer, and produce the value. And I think that if I can do that with 100,000 kids, with my story and kind of what I went through, that alone would be worth my time here on earth. And I really don't, that's the big idea. The other stuff is really just to fund and get more reference points for that.
That's great. So I know you've mentioned your YouTube page, and what's the best way to find that, and what's the best way to find you online?
Yeah, so definitely recommend everybody subscribe to my newsletter, because that's what we're here for. So /newsletter off Dan Martell, 2lsmartell.com, is where I produce my weekly YouTube show, and I do special invites, and I run contests, and I do a lot of last minute Facebook Lives if people want to interact with me. And then I delete them just kind of to create some value there. YouTube for sure, /Dan V as in Victor Martell, 2 L's again, is my YouTube channel. But, if anything I've shared with anybody has resonated, there is an organization I want to shout out, which is The Last Mile. They actually help prisons and penitentiaries create tech it's so random. They're tech startups, like incubators inside of penitentiaries. I would recommend everybody go check out their Quora page. So Quora is like a Q&A site, but The Last Mile has the inmates interacting and answering questions. The crazy part, and why I say it's kind of random, is that none of them have access to computers. So they're on Twitter and they're on Quora, but it's literally paper and pen. They answer it, somebody approves it, and then they go on Quora and they write their answers there. So I went and spoke in San Quentin to a group there. The founder, Chris Redlitz, is the creator of this out of San Francisco. They now serve multiple penitentiaries, but going into San Quentin and speaking to these guys have never, imagine explaining to somebody what Twitter is. It's never been on the internet. I mean, it was so interesting to get that perspective, and I just feel really honored. So anybody that asks me how they can support me, I just send them to The Last Mile, because it's an organization I'm deeply aligned with.
All right, last question for you.
What do you got?
What's your Fran time?
5:16, which
nice.
Is it nice? I don't know, man. I got my buddies are doing like 3:40.
Sub 3 minutes is kind of like a major. That's like a major dividing number, because the deal is with a sub 3 means that you go unbroken. You can do 20. So if anybody does a sub 3, it means you do 21 thrusters.
Sub 3.
Sub 3 minutes.
What's your time, Jeremy?
Best ever, 2:24.
Jesus, I'd be throwing up, man. I'd be throwing up so hard. Like, I remember I did it once about a month ago, and I was just like, I'm running out of here. I'm going home, and I don't care if somebody screams at me. Like, I was just so done. But you just kept plugging and plugging and plugging.
That's great. That's a good time.
It took me a day to recuperate. Yeah, my buddy texted me last night. He finally did it, and I think he was 7-something. He said it messed him up. Like, there's something biological with Fran that just it rips somebody apart. So yeah, appreciate you asking me that. I don't ever get asked that question in the business world.
Right on, brother. Well, hey, great to meet you, and I look forward to getting on myself and looking at your videos and whatnot. So,
dude, I'll come down to Austin near future. I'm there quite a bit. I'll look you up and we'll do a workout together.
That sounds great.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the time.
Yep.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Amplify Podcast. You can find more at theamplifypodcast.com. Our social links to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Join us in conversation. Let us know what you're thinking and how we can best service you guys. We will see you again really soon.